Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by Jacob Gibbs, and it is time for the rookie tight end preview. And Jacob, I don't know that there's anybody better to be on this episode than you. You just wrote all kinds of words about this tight end class. Tell people about the work you've been doing on the class in general and about the newsletter, which is where they can find a lot of these words.
Yeah, that's where those words are landing, is the newsletter. It's going out. It's scheduled Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And hopefully in the morning is what we're aiming for. But I honestly haven't been in the flow of writing for the past few months. I've just been watching tons of film. And so kind of getting back into that and finding the rhythm there. But I think each morning that's going to hit your inbox, and I'll just download you on all of this stuff I've been learning about this class. It's a really deep class, and it's a really nuanced class. There's a lot of different types of prospects. We're going to get into that with like comparing Elijah Arroyo to, somebody like Harold Fannin Jr. Like they're so different. And so, yeah, there's a lot to talk through, and I'll do my best to just kind of keep you guys updated on all of that as we get landing spots and figure out how these players are going to impact these teams.
On today's show, we will talk about the top 5 rookie tight ends and consensus rankings. That's Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Harold Fannin, Elijah Arroyo, and Mason Taylor. We've got a couple of Jacob's favorites coming up next. I will tell you, Jacob mentioned like it's a nuanced class, and it was really interesting because we're hearing reports that maybe 3 of these guys are going to go in round 1, which generally signals very good things for fantasy production. Also, Ryan Heath quote tweeted one of my tweets this morning, and we've had Ryan on the show before. We will definitely have Ryan on the show again coming up relatively soon, I hope, and mention the fact that, it's not, at least based on the testing information we have, an elite class based on relative athletic score. And this is a position that in the past, if you're not a first-round pick, that seems to matter a lot in terms of fantasy production. I think the way he said it was, this is the one position where guys can really consistently outproduce their draft capital based on their athleticism. So that will be an interesting discussion as well. But let's get started with 3 questions for our good friend Jacob. And I did this with Matt Waldman. I've done this with a couple of guests throughout this. We're going to talk about the top 5 by consensus, but I want to hear a little bit about your guys. So give me the elevator pitch for Gunnar Helm.
Yeah, that's a really good point by Ryan. And I do think that as you get deeper into the tight end class, there are a lot of tight ends where you're having to project them to sort of be an outlier based on their skill set, because their athleticism doesn't quite check all the boxes that you need. And tight end, more than really any position, we've kind of narrowed it down to like, you need to hit these boxes, you need to have these traits. But, you can succeed at the NFL level if you don't. There are a few, Jake Fergusons floating around that have had good careers in the right situations. And that's based on the skill set mostly. And that's where Gunnar Helm really shows up to me. And I think he's a great one to start with too, because his athletic testing, I do think, is affected by the ankle injury. I did a podcast with Davis Maddock yesterday, and he pulled up this, I was not ready for it, this gruesome ankle image of Gunnar Helm, his foot that he did the combine testing on. And so I would take those numbers with a grain of salt with him. When you watch the film, he is athletic. He looks really smooth out there. He's, hurdling guys. There were a number of hurdles in his film that he completed where he just looks a lot smoother than the rest of the tight ends that I watched. I think he's the 3rd most pro-ready tight end. He and Mason Taylor have a lot of similarities in the ways that they win. Soft hands. They're great, hands catchers away from the body. They're great at going up and getting the ball, high pointing the ball, and could probably be weapons on meaningful 3rd downs and short, where you only need 4 or 5 and you run an out route to that tight end, you think you can trust them, or in the red zone, you think you can trust them to go get a ball. I think both of those guys can do that. And I think Helm can do it better, but he is older. He is, I think, 22 or 23, but yeah, he was productive at Texas, which is not easy to do. If you watch the Texas film, the quarterback play there is frustrating. But he led the team in receptions last year, and he has put up decent production given the circumstances and given the fact that he's competing with pro-level wide receivers every step along the way. I really, really liked the skill set for Gunnar Helm.
Excellent stuff. Tight end number 2 that I wanted you to talk about. Give me the elevator pitch for Terrance Ferguson.
Ferguson is a little bit easier because his athleticism does check out. It's not like quite elite, but it's probably the best in this class because Elijah Arroyo didn't test. Ferguson has jumps, has speed, and has size. And when you watch the film, he's not quite as smooth at doing some of the stuff that I hit on with Taylor and Helm, but he's more like they're getting him on drags and stuff like that. They're getting him on horizontal breaking stuff and just getting the ball in his hands. And then he has really impressive build-up speed. But he was decently productive. I just sent out some tweets this morning this is the percentage of team receiving yards when on the field. And Ferguson is fourth on the list, just behind Loveland, Fannin, and Warren, and ahead of Helm, Arroyo, and Mason Taylor.
Very good stuff. Question number 3, and I think this is interesting because I know your rankings aren't the same as the way we're going to rank guys today. But I've heard a lot of kind of different breaks in terms of the tiers in this class. Some people have Warren and Loveland together. Some people have Warren on island and Loveland's with Fannin maybe, or Arroyo maybe. Where do you see the tier breaks in this class?
So it's clearly Loveland and Warren at the top for me. And I actually think that Loveland is a decent bit ahead of Tyler Warren, especially if we're talking about fantasy football. But even just for real life, I would have him ahead of Warren. And I considered putting him in a tier of his own, but that was a little bit too spicy. I didn't want people to just turn click out of the article immediately. I think he's really good. And we'll get into the conversation with those two for sure, because I do think it's really interesting. They're in a clear tier by themselves. If you look at their data compared to past prospects, if you're talking about the difference makers at tight end, those two are in or approaching that group. And there's one other guy who clearly is in that group from a data perspective, and I do have him in a tier of his own if we're talking about fantasy football, and that's Harold Fannin Jr. For real life football, I totally get why somebody would put Mason Taylor ahead of him. Mason Taylor is really young, but I mean, Harold Fannin's really young too.
Right.
Mason Taylor got on the field at LSU as a freshman. I think he's clearly a better physical specimen in terms of his ability to block and be a pro level tight end. Fannin, you're probably going to have to work around his limitations a little bit, but I would have Fannin in his own tier for fantasy, and then it's Taylor and the rest of these guys that we're going to talk about today.
Couple of pieces of housekeeping before we get to the first break and then jump really deep into this class. Remember to go enter FFT's draft contest. I'm just put that up on the screen. There's a link in the YouTube chat. You can win a spot in our podcast listeners league. And Adam Azer does a better job of explaining all the rules, but basically you need to get the pick right. Don't tell me a guy's going to be in the type 10. You have him 9th and he goes 2nd. That doesn't count. You got to get the pick and the player right. Number 2, Kevin asks, how early would you take a tight end in a 12-team Superflex league where tight ends are awarded 2 points per reception? Thank you, Kevin, for the question and for the nice comment. I wanted to tell you guys there will be another link coming a little bit later in the show, probably around the second break. I want to put it out there. And I have every day this week, I'm doing a rookie mock with you guys. Most of those I'm putting the link out there on X. And as soon as it fills up, we run the mock. I write a little article about it today. Before I put it on X, I wanted to put it to you guys. So we'll put a link in the chat a little bit later. You can join that mock draft. And my plan is as soon as it fills after the show, we'll run it with a quick 60-second clock. It's going to be a 1.5 tight end premium, not a 2-point tight end premium. But I think even in 1.5, Jacob, I would expect Tyler Warren to go no later than 4th, possibly as early as 2nd.
In 1.5, I certainly wouldn't want to take Tyler Warren that early, but I could see him going.
What about Colston Loveland
in the top 5? Yeah, Loveland, I think you could make the case, especially if you're a team that doesn't necessarily feel that competitive this year. I think the upside for Loveland is massive. Like, not Kelsey, because that is a truly unique set of circumstances that Kelsey had for his career in terms of his offensive environment. But Loveland, I think, has the talent to be a true difference maker as a receiver. So I guess you could reach on that kind of upside, but there's so many players that I just freaking love in this draft. I know, like I would just really have a hard time if Travis Hunter goes in the top 5 and he says, I'm playing receiver full time. The team says he's playing receiver full time. I'd really have a hard time taking them over Hunter over Amari Hampton, over Ted McMillan, unless McMillan like lands on the Saints or something. I think I would have a tough time putting these tight ends that high. And 2 points per tight end reception, I think that it makes sense. Yeah.
All right, that will do it for opening segment. Let's take a short break and let's jump into Tyler Warren.
They want to take this place from us.
My family is in danger. My wife is lost to me, and I don't have time.
1923, new season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
So you've already heard that he's not Jacobs' tight end one, but Tyler Warren definitely the tight end one in the consensus rankings. I will say in the one QB mock I did yesterday that was not tight end premium, Tyler Warren went third. So there are some people that really, really love this guy. And I guess, Jacob, let's start with this side of the evaluation. Why is he the consensus number one tight end in this class?
Well, I mean, on big boards, he's like in the top 10 for so many people in terms of real NFL drafts. And if he gets that type of capital, that's worth taking a shot on. He was really productive and he has some really cool highlight plays, just truly like spectacular hands for any player, but especially the tight end position. And that shows up a lot. It's not just a few highlights here and there. He's making contested catches over and over. I do worry a little bit about that translating because of the short arms. And I think defenders at the NFL level are just bigger and better and faster to that point of the catch. And so he's going to have to really I think it's going to be easier for people to get into his body and get to the catch point. But yeah, to take him that high, he really has to be similar to a Trey McBride kind of player or, Brock Bowers. I don't think that he has that though. I don't think that's backed up by data or with the film. I think so much of what he did was predicated on the role that he played at Penn State. And I suppose if a team decides that they're going to use top 12 draft capital on him, then maybe we'll see something similar. But I just don't know. A higher percentage of his catches and targets came on screens last year than Harold Fannin. And people can't get over how, much Fannin's production was, not replicable and how much it was boosted by his offense and everything. And it's Warren had the same thing going, really. They really, really manufacture touches to him. And that's really rare to see that happen at the NFL level.
So I want to talk about one other potential negative with Warren, and you may not see it as one. But how much do you care that he really wasn't productive in college until he was 22 years old and older than most people in the field?
I don't think it's quite as relevant as it is at wide receiver when we're talking about breakout age, but it is noteworthy. If you want to try to compare him to Brock Bowers, I'm going to shut that down immediately based off of this point, because it's Bowers at Georgia as a freshman with tons of NFL talent around him was the guy, right, and was the guy every step along the way. And that's not the case with Tyler Warren. And then even the peaks of, Bowers compared to him in terms of single season is not the same either. But yeah, I don't think that's super concerning. I think mostly we see the skill set that he has, and it's not like he's a 24-year-old or something. We see the skill set that he's rounded out by this point in his career, and I do think it's ready to translate. Tight end takes a long time to develop.
So clearly, you've made it clear you don't think he has Brock Bowers upside. Do you think he has Sam Laporta upside?
So Laporta is a little bit more interesting. Comparing them statistically, Laporta, you kind of have to take all of his numbers with a grain of salt because he played at such a run-heavy offense. But if you do look at it when it's the percentage, the per route data, or the percentage of when they were on the field and they were passing, it is Laporta ahead of Warren, but it's closer than it is with somebody like Bowers. I think statistically the more close comps are people like TJ Hawkinson and Michael Mayer. I think Hawkinson, and honestly Mayer's data is better. I think Hawkinson is probably the best comp in terms of the way that he wins with short yardage, yards after the catch, and stuff like that.
Let's get away from everybody else's number one tight end and get to Jacob's number one tight end, Colston Loveland. Not as productive as Fannin or as Warren in college, but you see immense upside here. Where does that come from?
Yeah, you have to look, under the hood a little bit here to see what's going on, because there's a reason that the numbers were not good, and that's that the offense was super dysfunctional. I had a hard time getting through Michigan games in 2024. Fortunately, I found a YouTube channel that has cut-ups of every target and touch, so I didn't have to watch every play, because I watched a couple. I watched every play for like 3 or 4 2023 games, and it was fine. It was fun to get back and watch JJ McCarthy, and it was good to get a glimpse of Loveland and what he could do as a blocker. And then I tried to do that for 2024, and it was like, this is legitimately the worst quarterback play that I've seen. And there was some really bad quarterback play last year at the collegiate level with some of these prospects, Luther Bird and all these guys suffered through some of it. And I truly don't think anyone had it worse than Loveland. And I've watched hundreds of games. So what I'll say with Loveland is his per route data and his, like, when he was on the field, those numbers are nuts. They absolutely jump off the page last year. But he got hurt. And that is something that people get frustrated with, is the injuries. I don't know what to say on that. Like, he is a big physical guy. I don't know how that will translate to the level. I don't see a reason why I would keep getting hurt. But when he's been on the field, his production has been as good as anybody we've seen in recent memory. I wish that I had data that was like further back than 2017, because he trumps everything. And so we see his per route data steadily improve from his first season to his third season, culminating in a 40% target per route run rate. So he's targeted on 40% of the routes that he ran in 2024. And what's so impressive about that is that that number wasn't boosted by screens. He only had 6 screens last year. Harold Fannin had 32. Tyler Warren had 33. So 24% of Warren's targets were screens, 21% of Fannin's were screens, 7% of Loveland's were screens. And still, he had the highest target per route run rate that we've ever seen at the tight end position. Fannin crushed any previous target per route run rate. His was 39%. Previously, the highest was Trey McBride at 33%. Fannin crushed that. And Loveland had a higher rate without the screens. And that's just insane to me. And people get a little bit frustrated about the yardage production. This is part of it. Like, he's not getting yak, and it's like chicken or the egg, I guess. Like, people are like, well, offensive designers are competent, which I don't know if that's always the right assumption, but people do say that. And so maybe the reason he's not getting screens is because he's not good after the catch. When I watched him, he's creating yards after the catch. He's tough. He's physical. He's fast. He's smooth. Like, I don't know why he wouldn't. I don't see anything skill-wise that would preclude him from being good at creating yards after the catch. I think it's possible that they were just like, go win. And they were. That's what, like, go win as a receiver, as a slot receiver, as an inline player. Just go be a route winner. And he did that. He produced almost 3 yards per route run last year in this offensive environment. So to me, like, everything, I see everything on film, and it's like, this guy he's not winning every single route. He's occasionally getting knocked off his routes, but he is still really young. He just turned 21 years old. And so to see him doing this, like, against a high level competition, Big Ten defense is about as good as it gets. And then you look at the data, and it's like, we haven't really seen anything like this at tight end. That's super, super exciting to me. I think the sky's the limit with him. An offensive coordinator can do anything with him, because you can put him in line, you can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide, you can create mismatches all over the field. You don't have to take him off the field.
So let's get into the hypothetical here. Tyler Warren is a top 12 pick. How high does Colston Loveland have to be drafted for you to keep him ahead of Warren in this class?
I think first round, and it's possible if he goes in the second round to like the Chargers or something like that, like a really just prime landing spot, that I would still put him ahead of him, but that would really be a reach and a banking on like the skill set and my conviction in him as a player, because draft capital does matter a lot, and like getting that kind of capital for Warren and the discrepancy between the two would be meaningful. But I mean, he's the data is so good, man. Like, the fact that Harold Fannin just turned in the craziest season we've ever seen by far at tight end, led the entire nation in receiving. And if you just look at the plays where the player was on the field, Loveland was better, was more productive than him. That's just wild to me, because Fannin's offense was designed to get him the ball every step along the way. And Loveland was just out there like saving them, like keeping them from like just turning the ball over every possession. Like I don't know, it just blows my mind.
You mentioned earlier about like if you're a team that's not necessarily winning now, you might be more likely to take one of these tight ends earlier in a tight end premium draft, because it does take a long time for the talent to translate a lot of times to this position and for the development to happen. But Loveland specifically amongst this class, do you think he's ready to contribute now, or do you think he is more of a project?
I think that he is, but I mean, if he, like, say he went to the Patriots or something like that, and they were kind of like, we really need you to handle like 25% of the targets right away, I would worry a little bit about that. He is really young, but he's improved every step along the way, and I really liked what I saw from the skill set as a blocker. I was expecting like him to be a negative as a blocker, because people compare like Warren to Gronk and him to Kelsey. But I actually think his blocking is better than Warren. And I've heard that from other people who watch a lot of film as well. Like Nate Ty said the same thing. And he's definitely got the frame for it and the mentality. I mean, this guy was recruited by Jim Harbaugh. It's not, like he is a hard-nosed player.
Right. Let's so those were the easy two guys. Then we get to tight end 3 in the consensus rankings. And to be honest with you, there's a bit of a why from both Jacob and I. Elijah Arroyo is the tight end 3 currently on Fantasy Pros over in the consensus expert rankings at tight end in this class. We're going to talk about Harold Fannin after the break, but I would wonder if, like, is there a case that you can make for why Arroyo should be ranked this high? Because a lot of people are, obviously.
I am going to need to like dig into comparisons more to see if there's anything similar because like from an average depth of target standpoint and an athleticism standpoint that has translated, because it would be pretty unique, I think, just thinking about the position and what we've had recently, to see a player come in like this and be a consistent fantasy producer, or even it doesn't have to be consistent necessarily because it's tight end we're talking about, but to be a fantasy producer. I think most likely Arroyo is going to be a real value add to an NFL team, but not somebody who's going to see more than 8, 10, 12% of the targets. He's the wild card, like if the skill set is rounded out and he's more than just a vertical threat, then, we're cooking, like if he's, Noah Fant plus, like something like that, then sure. Like that would be really, really intriguing. And when you watch him, he's crazy, man. He flies. Like I wish we would have got his testing, because he's legitimately running away from DBs.
Well, that's one thing I wonder. Do you think it's possible that people are giving him the RAS boost without the testing? Like they just watch him play and it's so obvious how athletic he is that we're going to give him the athletic scoring boost without actually doing the testing?
I think that has to be what's happening if we've got him at tight end 3. I was really surprised to hear that. I have him at tight end 7, and I really liked Arroyo. I really liked what I saw in the film. It took him a while to really get to play. He had injuries, and then even this year they kind of eased him in. But once he got a full-time role, he was really productive. I heard a crazy stat from Josh Norris. I think he caught like all of his initial 11 targets and was averaging like 20 yards per target on them or something. So like he really like forced his way into a role and just was insanely good this year. 12 yards per target, by far the highest mark in the class in 2024. But he is, he's going to be 23 years old as a rookie. And we haven't seen him ever, demand targets at a high level. But I do think, like we talked about, tight end more than other positions, you don't have to get attached to the data that you can not be productive as a collegiate player. But then if you have the traits, you can end up, having a productive NFL career.
You mentioned the injuries with Arroyo. I know you kind of weren't sure what to do with those with Colston Loveland. Are the injuries more of a concern with Arroyo, or you're just kind of shrugging your shoulders?
I mean, I never know what to say about this, honestly, Heath. Like he I guess has a slighter frame than some other tight ends. He moves his body incredibly fast, so maybe he gets himself on a collision course more. Like I really don't know.
Would you view him as a high ceiling, low floor prospect?
Yeah, for sure. If he can get a team that like wants to design him looks, and in addition to the vertical seam stuff, like maybe he's good with on screens. I didn't get to see him with the ball in his hands all that often because Miami had a lot of playmakers, and I think it made more sense to just go straight drop back and kind of let Cam Ward improvise, but like maybe he is good with the ball in his hands. I think he definitely has athleticism to become that kind of a threat. So if that's unlocked, then like all of a sudden, he's one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. And if he's in the right situation, that could be really fun.
That's Elijah Arroyo. He is currently the tight end 3 in consensus rankings. He is not my tight end 3. He's not Jacob's tight end 3. We're going to talk about Harold Fannin after the break, and that segment might take a long time because we both love him. But before we do, if you guys would like to do a mock draft in the next 30 minutes or so, Thomas, if you've got the link, there will be a link in the chat where you can click on that, claim your team. I'm trying to be a kind guy. I went ahead and just took the 12th pick. So I'm going to take the very last pick. It will be a super flex tight end premium mock draft. And we're doing 60 seconds per pick. It'll probably be over in 15 to 20 minutes. We're just doing 3 rounds. So real quick thing here. But if you want to be a part of it, go click that link in the chat. I'll also, if it's not full when the show's over, I'll put the link out on X as well and fill it that way so you can have a couple different opportunities to join. Although if we have enough people from the show join, people on X will get no chance today. You'll have another chance tomorrow. Let's take a short break and then get into Harold Fannin. Okay, Jake. Harold Fannin Jr. In case some of you guys have been under a rock for the last few months, I need to say these numbers. 117 receptions last year, 1,555 receiving yards last year. If you look over on Sports Reference at the college football page, and I use that every sport they have so often, so thank you guys for that good work, you'll see that those numbers are both bolded and sized. And that's because he led all of FBS in receptions and receiving yards. And you're thinking, well, okay, so he's the best tight end. No, he led all of FBS in receptions and receiving yards as a junior. Well, I guess a senior technically, but he's done now. He was a junior, right? 3rd-year player at the very least. Not old at all. Yes, he played at Bowling Green. But I don't understand how this guy is not in consideration for the top 2, or at least tight end number 3, arguably the most insane production we've ever seen from a tight end at the college level. Jacob, just keep raving about Harold Fannin.
Yeah, per Dane Brugler just started playing tight end as he entered college. He was a safety before that. So super young and still could be adding to his feel for the game. I think it's really he's one of the more interesting prospects we've had in a long time in any position. The production is wild. So I'll give you a few ways to contextualize it. First, I do want to point out that he averaged 3.25 yards per route run versus Power 5 schools. That's more than any tight end in the time that I have the data. Tyler Warren's was at 2.05. Brock Bowers was the next highest at 2.65, behind Fannin at 3.25. If I remove screens from that sample size, it drops to only 100 routes. So it's a small sample, but the yard per route run average rises to 3.5. So when he was asked to win versus the best competition that he played on big boy routes down the field, he did. You watch him against Texas A&M, against Penn State. He has huge games. 11 for 137 versus Penn State, 8 for 145 versus A&M. Got a touchdown in each of those. I think he's really, really good as a route runner. I know it's an unorthodox way of moving, but I think that affects the defense. The way that he moves, I broke down his film. If you want to search Jacob Gibbs, Harold Fannin, you'll see a thread or two where I'm diving into it in more detail. I really liked what I saw from him as a route runner. I think it could be translatable, even though he looks awkward as an athlete. And it's the straight line speed, the top end of that isn't what you want necessarily, but he definitely has some athletic testing that was encouraging, and I think it does show up in the way that he moves in terms of acceleration. The agility isn't quite there, and the straight line speed isn't quite there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all comes together. But a few more statistical points for you. So I broke down the career percentage of team receiving yards when on the field for some of the best tight ends to go into the draft lately. And basically they all fall in the 26 to 30% range. TJ Hawkinson, Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Isaiah Likely, Brock Bowers, Laporta, all in that range. Colston Loveland for his career is at 33%. Harold Fannin is at 43%. If you do it by touchdowns, it's the same thing, 21 to 36, 37%. Actually, it's 21 to 31% is most of them. And then you have Bowers at 37%, Isaiah Likely at 39%, and Fannin at 46%. I think Likely is the fun comparison. That's one that people make a lot. I think it was Coastal Carolina where he played. It was a small school similar to Fannin, and he was really, really productive, but not as productive as Fannin, not nearly as productive as Fannin by any measure, total or per play measures. The last thing I want to do with Fannin is I want to compare him to Trey McBride. I also compared him to Dalton Kincaid. You can find these on Twitter. It's a super dense tweet with a lot of different data points, whether it's athleticism or production or whatever. Kincaid, I think, is a really good comparison stylistically. I think they're actually really similar in terms of the way that you have to work around the limitations as a blocker, and how that has limited Kincaid to this point in his career. It hasn't been a great fit with Buffalo. And the same kind of thing could happen for Fannin, especially if he doesn't get draft capital that suggests that a team has a clear plan for him. McBride, I want to compare statistically. McBride at Colorado State put up per route data that blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it at tight end before in his final season there. And I think he's a good comparison because we've seen him find success at the NFL level. He's a bit undersized. Let me see here. I've got this size comparison. He is 1 inch taller, 5 pounds heavier than Fannin. Fannin has a longer wingspan. Vertical, broad jump, and bench press were the only combine tests that McBride participated in. Fannin beat him in all of those. I think McBride is a bigger, better athlete, but I don't think it's by a wide margin. I think he's a better blocker as well, but I think it's possible. Fannin is still young and not used to blocking. Like I said, he played safety. It's possible that he could develop in that area. 20 years old at draft day for Fannin compared to 22 for McBride. Broke out in year 2. McBride broke out in year 4. Both of them played at small schools. Each of them had 4 career games versus Power 4 schools. Fannin had 29 catches for 381 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns in those games. McBride had 21 catches for 247 yards and 1 touchdown in those games. McBride's yards per out run rate dropped when he faced Power 4 schools. Fannin's was steady, 3.25. McBride's was 1.91. All of it favors Fannin. I think they're a similar profile, but like all of it is better for Fannin. So I just think that's really interesting. I don't think we have to just like assume that everything Fannin did was fraudulent, because I definitely think you see him winning in more ways than just design touches and yards after the catch. You see him routing people up and getting open consistently and making catches in tight windows.
I want to just go back to something because Jacob said it. I just want to make sure you heard it. He's 20 years old. Yeah. He doesn't turn 21 until July the 20th.
Yeah, he's one of the youngest players in the whole draft, any position.
Last year, as a 19-year-old, he caught 44 passes for 623 yards and 6 touchdowns. There have been tight ends drafted very high in the NFL draft that was their best season in college. So there's a reason that Jacob and I both love this guy. I hope he gets good draft capital and a good landing spot, but we should, to be complete at least, talk about the concerns. So maybe you can just rank these concerns, because the 3 biggest that I see are the competition that he faced, the combine results, his athleticism and size, and his blocking. How would you rank those 3 concerns in terms of Fannin's success in the NFL?
I'll say the competition is number 1, because if the way that he wins just simply doesn't translate, then he's almost like useless. Like if I'll say that's 1, with the blocking being a close 2. They're 1A, 1B, because they go hand in hand. Like if the way that he wins doesn't translate, then he can't play at all, really, because he doesn't block very well. But I do think that the blocking could improve. I don't really know why it wouldn't be able to improve. Like I said, he has very long arms and he is really young and he's still learning to play tight end. But yeah, the competition, even that, like, because of to be fair, Texas A&M had a ton of games where they gave up big plays to big players. But like Penn State had a pretty solid defense, and like to see him in his only opportunities to keep doing it, just do the exact same thing, I think really like has me encouraged that he'll keep doing it. Like, I mean, I just looked up, I was curious how many screens Trey McBride had in his huge season. 28, so 4 fewer than Fannin. The percentage of the total targets is probably actually higher than Fannin's. It's really like I don't see any reason to just like exclude Fannin from being able to translate what he did to the pro level.
You can tell me I'm crazy. I'm giving you the opportunity, and I'm not projecting Fannin as the number 1 tight end. I'm not going to rank him as the number 1 tight end, although there's parts of me that want to. Am I crazy for thinking he could be the most productive tight end in this class?
We'll see what the NFL says. I'm really, really curious where he's going to get drafted. But no, I don't think that's crazy at all. I mean, it's not crazy to say the guy who just had, led the nation in receiving could be a really good pro. I think he definitely could. He's young. He's really, really exciting. I definitely think that that's within the range of outcomes. Even
Thank you, Ben. In terms of that, in terms of that draft capital, I've seen a lot of speculation. It seems like over the last week that he could be right at that 2-3 cutoff, maybe a late second, maybe an early 3rd round pick. I don't care so much about that cutoff, but there is a point to where you get concerned. Is the concern is if he falls to day 3?
Yeah, I was about to look up round 3 tight ends. So like Trey McBride was an early round 2 pick, mid round 2 pick. I do think, yeah, if he falls around 3, that would be a little bit concerning because, or you're saying day 3, that would be a little bit concerning because then it's like it might be a team that is just like not nearly as willing to give him the leeway. And I do think that's going to be important is the team willing to like experiment with this and like grow with him as because he is young and developing and like figure out how this works with him. Mark Andrews is a round 3 pick. Travis Kelce was a round 3 pick. Okay. Yeah.
We've had a couple of good ones. I'll feel a lot better about it if it's pick 65 than if it's pick 95 in round 3. Like that's a long round. So okay, that's enough on Harold Fannin. Let's get to tight end 5. Ram asked in the chat, when are we starting the mock draft? We're starting the mock draft as soon as this show is over, as long as the mock draft's full. I saw in the chat it looks like we have 2 spots left. So if you want to jump in, there is a link in the YouTube chat, and we'll do that super flex tight end premium mock as soon as we get done here. But we have 1 tight end left. And I don't think there's any reason to think that like this guy's a long ways behind everyone else in terms of the NFL's eyes or in terms of the type of impact he could have on an NFL team. It's Mason Taylor. So what's your eval on Taylor?
He's really underwhelming from a data standpoint. And so like at first, as I started my process, I hadn't gotten to his film yet. And I was just really confused why he was ranked so high other than being young and being Jason Taylor's son. But I really liked his film. Like I said, I did like Gunnar Helm's better. But I do think that like he showed a lot of translatable skills, made some really, really nice catches along the sideline. Fluid athlete, and he's super strong. I thought that didn't necessarily show up in his blocking all that much, but he is still young, and so that might be something that just needs technique to unlock. 28 bench press reps is pretty insane. So yeah, I get it. Like I think it's clear like how a team could see this and like have a vision for him just being like the every down tight end. But for fantasy, he's somebody who if I'm gonna be in, it's like I'll see if I can just buy him dirt cheap in a year or something, because it's probably going to take a while for him to contribute any meaningful receiving production.
And he is like Fannin, 20 years old, a couple months older. So again, like you said, a very young guy, great pedigree, great abilities in terms of just athletic abilities, maybe not receiving abilities. He looks to me like someone who could be much more valuable to an NFL team than a fantasy football manager. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's where I'm at with him. I do think that like he can get open on those out breaking routes and is pretty smooth with the ball in his hands, but I just don't see an NFL team like prioritizing that when you've got other pass catchers.
I think he is the type of tight end. We have these every year, but he's the type of tight end who has 600 yards receiving, but scores 10 touchdowns. So he finishes as tight end 7 that year.
Yeah, I think he could sneak into those kind of years for sure. Probably not early though.
But he doesn't have the upside of a Fannin or a Loveland or a Warren of maybe being a 20% target share guy within an offense.
No, I didn't see that.
That's going to do it for our rookie tight end preview. I want to finish up with one more question, Jay, because I've had a joke going in my articles and on this show for 5 years probably. Every time we say how deep tight end is at the beginning of the year, we get another terrible tight end season where tight end 12 averages like 9 fantasy points per game, and there's 16 guys who do that. I've heard a lot of people talking about this tight end class and how exciting it is and how we're going to have depth at the position because of these guys. Is this going to be a fooled you once again, or is this the class that combined with Bowers and McBride and Laporta, we're actually going to have a depth of young talent at the tight end position, and the position's not going to be awful?
I have been fooled too many times, so I'm gonna just say that it's probably going to be more of the same. It's just not a position like I said with Tyler Warren. Like, it's really rare that offensive designers are like, I want to get my tight end the ball. Like the NFL has the absolute best of the best players, and like the talent at receiver right now is so insane. And then also, almost any running back that comes in the NFL at this point is like a capable pass catcher. It's like a clear red flag when they're not. So like it's rare that we see the tight ends matter for fantasy. And if I'm looking at this class and being honest, like the people who are the most likely are Fannin and Loveland and then Warren. And beyond that, I wouldn't be surprised if none of them are ever priority pieces for an offense.
One more rapid fire question, because Ram tells me we've got 12. As soon as Jacob finishes this question, I'm going to end the stream. I'm going to jump in the chat and jump in the draft and start the draft. What are your 3 favorite landing spots for a tight end in this draft? Who do you think is going to draft one early, and who do you want to see these guys go to?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it. People bring up the Colts a lot, but I don't think I would put that up there. So I think the Chargers are clearly one, and then the Broncos probably. Do you have anything off the top?
I was going to say that I'd really like for the Chiefs to draft Harold Fannin and have him play behind Kelsey for 1 year and then just have a feature role in the offense.
People keep bringing up the Chiefs as a landing spot for these tight ends, man. I want Jared Wiley to be good and come back.
I want Jared Wiley to be good again. Jacob, you were awesome. Thank you to Thomas for running everything. Thank you to everybody who was active in the chat and is getting ready to draft with us. We will talk to you on Friday with a round 1 recap.